45. Brown, 45. Hot, 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 hot.
You are listening to Any Given Sunday, Australia.
Yes, hello and welcome to the Any Given Sunday Australia podcast, the number one podcast in at least 3 households, 1 studio, NFL Australia head office, American Football Australia head office, and today the ESPN head office, because middle of the season, both my co-hosts have decided to go take some leave at the same time. Didn't work that out well. So I've got a special guest co-host, the ESPN insider, the Any Given Sunday insider, long-time friend, Laurie Horesh. How are you, mate?
I'm doing very well, especially after that glowing intro. I'm not sure I've earned all those plaudits, but happy to help fill in while 2/3 of the podcast take bit of early holiday time. They got the New York Giants vibe and they're just going on a little boat trip, bit of premature celebration.
Absolutely. They've decided that they're, considering the fact that they're the Bills and the Eagles fans, they're either going early to have a little bit of a break pre-playoffs or, decided their season's already over and they've gone.
Troubling form. Although I'll say, both those teams have been feeling pretty good after this week. I know we're going to get into it a bunch, but especially I think the Eagles after, a week of interesting off-field headlines and questions about chemistry, and in the immortal and now infamous words of AJ Brown, shut up, everyone, basically.
I am so glad I've got you as a Cowboy man on to talk about that because I have a lot of questions. But we're going to start.
I'm an open book.
Oh, yeah. We're going to start week 15. We've had you on plenty of times. We know how open you are. Week 15 started off with a bit of it was a field goal fest. And if I was to say, it was a little bit of a snore fest with the Rams getting the job done against the Niners. And pretty much, there's still mathematically a chance, but it's pretty much ending the 49ers season, mate.
Yeah, look, they can't all be beauties on Thursday Night Football. I actually think this season, and this is a bit anecdotal, and we can run through the schedule if you really want, because that's exactly what the fans and listeners want to hear. But we've actually been treated to a pretty solid and exciting at times Thursday Night Football slate this season. I think on the whole, it's been a good one. And Thursday Night Football often a little maligned because it's a short week, and we don't often get the big names and the big producers firing in the way that we're accustomed to in their traditional time slots. But look, it wasn't a beauty, but the big important thing is that the Rams got the W in this one. And with other NFC West teams in rather sloppy affairs, shall we say, just finishing up Sunday Night Football and the performance put down by the Seattle Seahawks with Geno and then without Geno Smith, the big thing is the Rams got the victory. They, claw themselves back up to level pegging in terms of wins and losses with the Seahawks. They've got a run of divisional games to close out the final, month of the regular season, and the future's in their hands. And if you're looking across the NFC West, you mentioned where the 49ers currently sit now, what we just saw from Seahawks. Hey, we got a resurgent form from the Arizona Cardinals, who put a 40-burger up on Jim Harbaugh's defense of the Chargers. But I think when I look across that division, where the Rams have been able to claw back from after a disappointing start to the season, the healthy weapons that they have, and they've got 2 things that they know that they can do well. They can sling that thing around. They can rush the passer. We know the back end's not the best in terms of, the big name secondary that some other teams get to roll up. We know there's young talent up front. They can Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, whoever else gets a target here or there, little Tutu Atwell, if that's your flavor. They can sling it around, and Kyren Williams, they know they can turn around and give the ball to him about 1,000 times a game if they need be. So they've got obvious strengths. They can lean into them, and right now, the rest of the division's floundering a bit. So ugly field goal fest, but for this team in a division that's stuck around 500, the win means more than any pretty points.
Yeah, like you said, the Cardinals now 7-7 with their W this morning. The Rams, I reckon, were written off pretty early in the season as well. They had a few injuries. Puka wasn't playing that well. I think he had a couple of injuries earlier as well. Cooper wasn't quite back to the way he was. But now the Seahawks, and with Geno going down with, look like a bit of an injury to the ankle, not sure how serious it actually is yet, but they'd be red-hot favourites to take out the West.
Well, I think, they dealt with their injuries early on, and it was, especially with the injuries to the offensive line as well. We focus on the big fantasy, the big skill position players, because that's what's in everybody's hearts and minds, at least on their fantasy side of the aisle. But they invested so much in that big offensive line, the interior of the offensive line in particular. They were coming in with one of the heaviest interior threes that we'd ever seen. Steve Avila, who I got to speak to out at Rams camp, we've been sharing some content throughout the season, and we've had to hold a bit of that because he did get hurt. We didn't want to pop out, big Steve's smiling face and his tremendous head of hair while he was working his way back from injury. But they made that investment there, and then they got hammered up front, basically circling through a whole new offensive line with the losses that they had there. But that's made its way back. And all you have to do, it doesn't matter how good you look in September and October. This is cliche stuff, but when the division's tight and when the division's all stuck around the same number, it's where you're peaking. Now, 12 points on offense isn't exactly peaking, but the results they've stacked together, I think it's 7 of their last 9 they've won. They're undoubtedly the form team there. And beware someone like Matthew Stafford. Who knows? Hey, this could be it. This could be the final ride for the golden arm of Matthew Stafford. And it's all still there. It's all still potent in that right arm of him. He's still got an absolute howitzer. He's still seen just about every defensive look you can come up with and every exotic pressure or simulated blitz or whatever it is. He's seen it all. And beware someone that is playing with familiar talent, with potent talent, that can absolutely just at some point say, let's let this thing rip. When we did a show a couple of weeks ago, an episode of the NFL Brekkie Show, and me and Phil were handing out early Christmas gifts. What would we give to teams? Obviously, it's past the trade deadline, and there's non-free agents hanging out there. You get prime Reggie Wayne on your team, but we were kind of saying, what dials could you turn that already existed within within rosters and within depth charts? What could you turn up to 11 and say, lean into this? And for us, for the Rams, it was just, let's get the play action thing. Let's get that big, heavy play action going. And let's let Matthew Stafford rip this thing to this talent that's out there. And I'm starting to sound like John Gruden on TikTok at this point. But that's what I believe they can absolutely turn towards as they have these key divisional matchups the rest of the way and make themselves an absolute pain of a team to play in the playoffs, because they get that thing going early. They get the offense going early and play with a lead. Like I said, defensive secondary might not be household names, but that talent up front in that pass rush is a problem for everybody.
We've spoken about this for a long time, but one last little bit before we move on to today's games. You say about familiar talent up forward and familiar talent to be targeting for Matthew Stafford. I believe OBJ's just cleared waivers, has he not?
Yeah, OBJ, the experiment down there in South Beach with Miami coming to an end. I mean, look, for OBJ, that was the last image we have of prime OBJ, because he was phenomenal. That Super Bowl
first half. Incredible,
he was the MVP of the game. He was the MVP at that point in the game. He was electric. He looked every bit the OBJ we remember from the explosive first half of his career. It has not, after an injury, suffering that knee injury in that big spot was incredibly heartbreaking to see for him. Yes, he gets a Super Bowl ring out of it, but we know that that's not how he wanted to finish that season and that massive moment, particularly for one of the biggest names of his generation, really. However it went after those first handful of seasons in New York, OBJ has been one of truly the biggest names of his generation. So that was the last time we saw that window into the talent that he brought to the NFL. Is it something they look at? We shall see. If it's something where, if it's something Matthew Stafford wants, if Sean McVay can cook up plays for anybody, if it's something that those two get together, again, with the front office there, with the Rams, and say, look, this is something that, just something a little extra we could have. There's a package that we'd like to work with OBJ. He brings an element. He's a different type of receiver than Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua in his prime or now. It's a different archetype of receiver. If that's something that they cook up, there's far worse calls that Mr. Beckham Jr. could be getting at this point of the season and after the lackluster campaign it's been, to say, hey, the Rams are calling. How do you feel about a little flight over the West Coast?
Heard it here first. OBJ to the Rams for another Super Bowl run. All right, this morning's slate, it kind of went exactly how we thought. Look, I haven't checked exactly, but I think every favourite actually won from this morning. I don't know if there was any outstanding upsets. Anything out there that stood out for you, mate?
Yeah, I'd need to go back and check who was favoured in the Chargers Buccaneers game before I mistakenly said the Cardinals put up a big score on the Patriots.
It was the Bucs.
A big score on the Chargers. It was a big score the Cardinals put up on the Patriots. Cardinals and Buccaneers, I have mental crossover issues with. There's actually 3 teams down there: the Buccaneers, the Falcons, and the Cardinals. In a pinch, my brain will go a little haywire. and throw them around. But no, the Cardinals were resurgent with their 30-17 victory. I think, look, the Buccaneers putting 40 on the Chargers was, I need to check who was exactly favourite, but I think that number up on Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers defense certainly stood out as the Buccaneers, rightfully take control of the NFC South. We'll see the Falcons play tomorrow, but the Buccaneers have been the ones whose results been pointing in that direction and whose resilience through everything that they've overcome this season. The interesting story to follow with the Buccaneers is that this looked for a long time, but the amount of time that Mike Evans missed this season, it looked like this might be finally 11th season in. The Mike Evans might not bring up 1,000 yards in a regular season campaign. He's done it 10 for 10. He's been perfect on the way to Canton, where he'll undoubtedly wind up. And it looked a little dicey, but 159 yards and a couple scores today. That's put him at, by my math, I think 749 yards with 3 weeks to go, 251 to go. 200, and he is letting Bacon. And look, it's not exactly like Jalen McMillan. I loved coming out of Washington, and he had a nice little day today, and he's had plenty of moments in his rookie season. I think he looks great as part of whatever that receiving core looks like in the future. But it's not like they're overloaded with weapons. We know, obviously, Chris Godwin's very prolific start to the season cut short. But, yeah, there could be plenty of targets going his way. Look, the Cowboys beat the Panthers. The Panthers were favourites, but I think 30-14. If that had gone 30-14 Panthers, wouldn't have been surprised. It went 30-14 Dallas. Not really surprised. Mike Parsons back out there playing pretty peed off, shall we say? I'll keep it clean. Yeah. No, he's playing pretty pissed off football in a good way, right? He's motivated. He's frustrated by the results. He's frustrated by what's happened this season. He wants victories. He talked about wanting titles. He also talked about, rumors that he could be traded and the NFL's all a business. That all came up after the game as well. But I guess those would be the not upset-ish results that jump out. Yeah. But like you said, plenty of chalk there. The Ravens taking care of business. The Chiefs not doing it pretty. Big high ankle sprain to Patrick Mahomes, I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit. And I guess if you're looking for an upset, how about the Jets finding some mojo? Nearly 200 yards between Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams on the day. Everyone's saying, oh, it's vintage. Oh, what could have been? Oh, it's just like when they were back in Green Bay, and for moments there it was. Well, I don't know. It was the yards of separation that Devontae Adams might have had back in his Green Bay days. Don't need to tell you all about that. Fond memories for yourself. But a ridiculous day. Plenty of mercurial moments from Adams, who's showing all the savvy, the nous, and his ability to just time things up. And some big clutch moments from him as well. Those would be the moments that really went, let's just put a little statement down and maybe upset a little bit of the apple cart on what was a pretty chalky morning.
Is the Jets' performance this morning, it kind of makes me think you're going down the 17th or the 18th and you've had a stinker, you're on 110 and you birdie the last hole and go, you know what, I'll go again next year. Like, is that what we're kind of feeling from Rodgers and the Jets?
I think if they stack a couple of these together, perhaps. I don't think it should be. I think they're one of a few teams that shouldn't overly value some rosy results after the season has already taken a turn. I don't need to get into specifics, but anyone who knows me and has followed me can probably guess one of the teams I'm referring to there. But no, I think the Jets absolutely need to move on and move on from Aaron Rodgers. And obviously they've moved on from front office staff and head coaches, and there's going to be a reboot there. But it's the type of performance, like if they stack a couple of these things up with the way that franchise and that ownership responds to the market and tends to have pretty big ears to what's going on in the local media scene and everything, you could absolutely see how they think that, rolling this back for one last ride is total. We've seen them do it. They can do it again, even if it's when they needed to do it and when it was most important for them to do it. They fell so inadequately short.
Yeah, it's got a long putt on the 18th kind of feel about it. I'm just, like you said, especially if they stack a couple together, it's just real smelly.
Long putts on the 18th after a rough day, best celebrated with beer or whatever your beverage of choice in the clubhouse is, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, whatever. A nice, cold, frosty beverage, and not with a contract extension.
Yeah, not coming back tomorrow to do it all again. You mentioned Mahomes' ankle injury. That's probably the one story that's come out. He's even come out himself and said Saturday's probably looking a little bit dicey against the Texans. They have already sewn up, obviously, their division, and they're 2 games clear for the number 1 spot. I'm imagining they're probably going to be resting him 1, if not 2 weeks.
Not the first time we've had a big Mahomes ankle injury late in the regular season or into
No.
the playoffs. Hasn't exactly stopped them from stacking up Lombardis. But yeah, this is going to be massive. And, who doesn't want Carson Wentz football for Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate? We're going to get a little Carson. Pennsylvania. I don't know what Missouri, Kansas City. I don't know how you work Carson. Where's Carson City? I don't even know what state that's in. Hold on. I'm going to quickly look up where Carson City is. It's in Nevada. So that doesn't work either. But regardless, it's going to cause unease, not just because of the injury in itself in a vacuum, high ankle sprain, not a fun injury. An injury that 10 years ago you hear a high ankle sprain, but it's just a sprain, it's fine. And we've learned so much that high ankle sprains can be season enders, and they can be season changers.
Yep.
Even if you do get back on the paddock. But I think it's because look how it happened. Jumping in the pocket away from pressure. Again, he's getting beat up behind that line. That's the bigger thing. Before the injury, looking at this stalling, stagnant, rhythmless Kansas City Chiefs offense, what you noticed was how beat up he was. There's no easy plays. There's a lack of downfield explosion. We know all that. But he was so harassed in the pocket. That left tackle spot's been an issue. The protection as a whole hasn't been fantastic at all. And when you watch, he's fantastic and elusive in the moment, in clutch moments when he needs to be. He can make a man miss. He can get outside the pocket, do weird things. He'll break the glass in case of an emergency with the big 40-yard scamper up the middle in the postseason. He's broken out in the regular season so far this campaign, but we've seen that so massively in big, high-leverage postseason moments. But he's not Josh Allen as a mover. He's not Lamar Jackson as a mover.
Nope.
And so there is that limitation when the pocket is so bad that he can still do amazing things under pressure. He's been, for most of the season, the best third down quarterback in the NFL still, despite the drop-off in numbers elsewhere. But he's going to take more of a physical beating, and that's what seemed to be weighing down as I was looking at this. And they've got – I've been adamant that from a skill position talent, they don't have Rashee Rice, who's been fantastic since emerging and unfortunately lost to injury, but between a still decent, not dominant, but still decent DeAndre Hopkins with Xavier Worthy providing 4 or 5 catches a game and the chance to break, make some tackles, disappear behind him, make some people miss and get into the end zone. Travis Kelce at least being somewhat consistent this season, if not explosive, and with someone like Hollywood Brown coming back as well, and 2 healthy running backs with Pacheco and Kareem Hunt rediscovered. From skill position talent, they've been in worse spots. But that line and not being able to get any sort of rhythm there, that was what was jumping out to me. And now we're going to put whatever his ankle looks like in a couple of weeks, maybe back out there. It's the most doubt I've had about their ability to make a run. Anytime you question the Kansas City Chiefs on social media, choose your platform, people will be like, oh, look, they're in this spot. You guys were all writing them off last year, blah, 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 blah. Okay. The defense has taken a step back this year. And there were still moments, there was still health on the offensive line. I think the offensive line was playing far better last year than they are this year. So I think the infrastructure around him, the supporting cast, both when he's on the field and not off the field, from the trenches, from defensive standpoint and the trenches up front, I don't think it's there as much. And this is the most doubt I've felt about their ability to make a run. I'm not stupid enough to say they can't make a run. It's Patrick Mahomes, it's Andy Reid, it's Kelce and the rest. But the foundational elements feel really shaky at this time of year.
I think Andy Reid's really going to show that he's the difference maker going forward. Like you said, they've been in worse spots, but I think one of the biggest stats I saw today, and I haven't actually gone and fact checked it, but I'm going to run with it. I saw it on socials. It has to be true. They're one of 5 teams that haven't scored 30 points at all this year.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that's the biggest stat for me that kind of stands out. In previous years, they've been able to blow teams away. They've been able to be in score fest when their defense hasn't been as good. But not having those kind of numbers. When it comes to playoffs, when they're playing, I know obviously the other side of the division, the conference, but the Lions, when they play the Bills, they're going to have to, they've obviously shown that they can throw big scores. I'm just not confident that they're going to be able to get those scores.
There's no release valve in this offense. There's no release. There's no chunk play that you can turn to. The release valve has been him. A scramble here, a first down picked up with his legs. In that huge moment last week on the third down conversion the conversion for first down to Travis Kelce, where he makes someone miss. using that slippery grace that he has and his eyes staying downfield because he's not panicked in that moment. That's been the only release valve. It hasn't been else. There's not chunk gains in the run game routinely or explosive moments. It's, it felt like if Kareem Hunt could barrel through for, 12 yards when he was in that purple patch in the middle of the season, that is what it felt like because, even the chucks downfield today, there was an early one to Justin Watson. And even that, you thought, it's a big throw downfield. There's a flag out. There you go. It's not a chunk completion. It's going to be a chunk gain, though, with passing. No, it was offensive pass interference against 84 in the red. So those aren't there. And the defense hasn't. They were better against the Chargers. They weren't overly challenged. They were good today. I don't think they were overly challenged today, not like they were against the Chargers. But yeah, this hasn't been a dominant defense. It hasn't been a dominant pass coverage unit all season to the level that we'd seen Spagnuolo's unit in prior seasons.
And we are well gone of the days of Tyreek Hill getting 200 yards in the first half. So it's going to be an interesting few weeks. I think they'll manage it pretty well. And like I said, this is where Andy Reid will kind of show that he's the X factor of this team, I think. So we'll see. Obviously, they're in the playoffs. They're not worried about that too much. But they definitely want that number one seed. An extra week off is going to help their battered up offense for sure. The Eagles, speaking about impressive, and I'm glad that you're here because Danny Boy really rides home how good they are and Saquon Barkley for MVP. And I need to put a wet blanket on it. I feel like a Cowboys supporter is the man to do it. No. They get a good win against the Steelers, who have kind of been, I don't know how you feel in the ESPN offices. They're not really getting the kudos I don't think they deserved for this season so far. But an impressive win against the Steelers, but a team that it just hasn't impressed me to this point. Even though it was 10 straight today, it's not a team that me as a Packers fan on that side, I'm going, shit, they're the team that we have to beat.
When it comes to the Eagles, look, this is one of their best wins of the season, without a doubt. Up against a 10-win Steelers team, the Pennsylvania rivalry, their cross-state neighbours. To have one of their biggest games, biggest victories of the season, have it be a day where Saquon Barkley was a bit banged up and didn't look great, 3.5 yards a carry, only 65 yards, falling down the backfield a couple of times. That made me catch my breath there for a second because, you see someone slip in the backfield without much contact around them. And this day, with the run we've been on lately, you start to catch your breath. But what was so important for them, and they let it know, and they have been vocal about this after the game. I mentioned what A.J. Brown saying this performance was basically to tell everybody to shut up, everybody outside to shut up. Jalen Hurts sitting down at his press conference basically starting with, is that what you guys wanted to see? Yeah, and you should feel, you should be feeling yourself after that. Jalen Hurts having a very clean day out there, doesn't turn the ball over through the air. We have, nearly 300 yards. Not a huge passing volume day, 32 passes, but completing at such a high clip. And finding those names so familiar. This wasn't a everybody gets 50 yards performance. This was literally like, you want to see these big names. Dallas got it out. It's Calcaterra in there right now. But you want to see the big names go, okay, a dozen targets for you, Devontae Smith, and you can have 109 yards and a touchdown on the day. And then 9 targets for you, A.J. Brown, including some early ones. We get you in for 110 yards. They were literally separated by a yard on the day. It felt almost like deliberate. And a touchdown for you as well. It felt it against a really, really good Steelers defense. And that's why I think we've become accustomed to, especially over the last decade, celebrating offense. It's been an offensive league. The rules favor the offense passing and all this. That when you are a defensive dependent team, you don't get the shine that you used to. We don't talk about teams like these defenses don't come around all the time, but the way that the Ravens used to be talked about. And you can quote the 85 Bears if you want, but that predates me being born, certainly me watching football. So often those teams, particularly the Steelers, because they haven't played sexy football in a long time. They haven't solved the quarterback position since before Ben Roethlisberger retired. They're not going to get as much shine. But this was a day where perhaps a more complete roster showed. Look, the Eagles' defense has been absolutely elite, number one in a whole bunch of key metrics and categories. The tape's been great. The draft class has come on like a house on fire. There's so much positivity there from what the Eagles have put together, and I think on balance of squads, they put together a more complete roster. I think neither quarterback has disappointed this season, but neither quarterback has lit the world on fire. I think there's probably some people that have similar issues with either quarterback in terms of their ceiling. I don't think Russell Wilson's ever been heralded for his work over the middle of the field. I don't think Jalen Hurts has ever been heralded for his work over the middle of the field. Beautiful deep ball, loves to work the sidelines. But what we saw today was talk about just what the doctor ordered for whether they want to admit it or not. And Brandon Graham admitted certain things or hinted at enough things. This is what they needed internally, but certainly this is what a city like Philadelphia, a team like the Eagles, the attitude they have to give the old metaphorical double single digits to the rest of the world and just let them know, is this what you wanted to see? Is this what held you back from crowning us as true Super Bowl contenders? We'll have some of that.
I know Danny Boy's listening to this while he's away, and he'll be grinning like a Cheshire cat because he knows that I was searching for you to come out and just be like, nah, do you know what? They're not as good. There's so much noise. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
When there is with any team, I will. I felt it about the Eagles last year, and it came to fruition because there were so many empty calories in those victories on the road to that 10-1 start, and it came to fruition. But look, whether you love them or hate them, or you go for a division rival, or you go for an AFC West team and forget, teams in the NFC even exist sometimes. You have to appreciate the adversity and noise that this team has dealt with so far this season, because there was noise around everything: quarterback, head coach, throughout the roster chemistry, how you're going to replace leadership, names that have moved on, big franchise names outside of just Jason Kelce that were no longer part of the picture. And they've weathered that, and they are improving. And unlike last year, it is December, Christmas is almost here, and they're putting up arguably their best performance of their season. If not that, then certainly one of them.
I think that's pretty comfortable, especially coming off a pretty near win game against the Panthers, where I kind of put the heat on them and said, if you're going to put up those performances, you might as well hand in the towel now. But
absolutely,
they've come out and, like you said, the proverbial middle finger to everyone else to say, stuff you, we're good. The Bills and Josh Allen, he's gone a long way to almost cementing that MVP. Surely he's ended the Lions streak in a shootout, but you can speak all we want about the Bills. We have Charlie talking all the shit about the Bills every other week. My thing is the Lions, it's a loss. It's not the end of the world for them. They're definitely, they still put up 42 in like I said, a shootout. But the defense is starting to worry me a little bit. More injuries today. When does it become a problem that we go, well, hang on a minute, this is going to be more than serious?
Well, I think you're seeing when it becomes a problem when you play the best offenses in the league, which they're going to have to do in the playoffs. That's when it becomes a problem, when you can no longer dictate terms up front enough with your offense that you can force other teams to be one-dimensional, which allows you to cover up whatever issues you're dealing with defensively with so many injuries. And look, it's real. Like, everyone has injury problems. I get that. But when you walk around with 13 guys on IR at one point, particularly defensively, Aleem McNeil goes down as a fantastic player up front. We know the issues up front they've already had with Aiden Hutchinson. We're on Aiden Hutchinson watch for the Super Bowl if they can make it that far. At the linebacker level, they've lost multiple players. At the secondary level, you're losing these contributors, and that's what makes it so hard, is because now it's not, okay, we're a little banged up front. What can we do to just support the fellas up front and adjust how we're playing in the back half of the defense? And yeah, when you don't, so much of football, as I, learn 1% of what, an NFL player would know over their season, but so much football, the more you watch it, you realize is, how you're able to dictate things up front, how you're able to dictate the game with forcing other teams to be one-dimensional, and how that flows into that battle up front. When you are forcing teams to chuck the ball all the time and you have an advantage in pass rush, it changes the dynamic massively. It's a different contest. It may as well be different teams out there than when you started at 0-0 and you have to respect both things. So for a team like the Lions that has some interesting matchups the rest of the way, that's where it's going to start showing. Now, this was, you're right, it was a shootout. There were 90 points scored. I think nearly 1,100 yards of total offense was the line coming out of it. But let's give credit where it's due to the Bills. They held this thing at arm's length. They had multiple score leads. They were outplaying them. Josh Allen is locked up. I believe he's locked up MVP. And, tough to say that to Lamar Jackson when he throws a 5-pack. Yeah, Lamar comes out there before and, it gives us a Michelle Pfeiffer. And it still doesn't make a dent on Josh Allen's lead. on the Super Bowl standing. So for the Lions, so they've got Bears coming up. They get the 49ers at a good time to get the 49ers, but this thing's coming down to that Week 18 game. If the Vikings take care of the Bears tomorrow, they're level on wins and losses, and if those two can win out and get our way to Week 18, absolute beauty. That's something special, and that's another team where how are you going to keep pace with a really well-designed offense, or how are you going to contain a really well-designed offense? Two receivers, we talked about A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Talk about receiver double acts that are just absolutely firing. Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Throw in what you get from Aaron Jones on the ground game, and there are other contributing receiving weapons as well, whether it's to the tight end or the wide receiver spot. That's where it's going to show up, and full faith that the Lions coaching staff, the talent they have assembled there. Look, nobody that started Lions in fantasy today, is sitting there going, I wish they'd be more productive. It's a pretty solid outing on the day, but you're coming up against the best of the best, and if they're still, we'll see the timelines vary for different returns to injury, but having so many contributors hit at every single level of that defense is going to get exposed in some of these matchups.
Just listening to you say, if they can win out and we're going to have a Lions-Vikings Week 18 finale, I was just looking at the Eagles finish. They've got 3 divisional games, so they're always tighter. Commanders, could cause, it's probably not an upset if the Commanders win, but Cowboys or Giants, you just never know in those kind of games. You just never know.
Yeah.
If one of those 3 teams can cause an upset and these other 2, that'll be for potentially the number 1 spot.
Now we're talking about number 1 seeds on the line, and for a team like the Lions, where we've been talking about them as Super Bowl, we're talking about them as home field advantage at the playoffs, and now could we be talking about them as a 5 seed?
And who wants to be the 4 seed when you've got the Lions coming in, and they'd be pissed off too if they landed at 5.
Well, and it'd be such a fascinating battle because you've got the Buccaneers and in the NFC South currently leading on 8-6, and you got 8 wins leading the NFC West as well. So it'd be an absolute race, not just within those divisions, but between those divisions to absolutely get out of the 4 slot, because nobody wants any piece of a really enraged Lions team if they do happen to slip down to that 5 spot.
Am I wrong in thinking, was it the Bucks that beat the Lions earlier? I know the Rams.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, all the way back in September, which feels like a lifetime ago, held this roaring Lions team to 16 points. It was 20-16. This was, however many injuries ago. This was when Jared Goff was off to their interception start to the season. Jared Goff threw the ball 55 times in that contest, which is not a recipe for victory. Meanwhile, we had Baker Mayfield throwing for about a third of that. Baker Mayfield with 19 attempts on that game and the win, and less than 200 yards passing, while the Lions, chucked it about in a desperation circumstance. But teams have changed a lot, but you throw some revenge factor in there as well, because
I think it's either going to be the Bucks or probably the Rams. So Bucks beat them, Rams might have beat them as well, and it's the Goff and Stafford matchup. Like, that's
the Rams. They lost 26-20, but that was the season opener for both these teams, and that one went to OT. So some nice, familiar, recent results there for both those teams. So the NFC side of things is shaping up. We've got a nice little 3-horse race between 3-horse but 2 division race for the top seed, and I think a week ago, vibes feeling very strong about the Lions and feeling very, very shaky about the Eagles, and I think that's been flipped on its head. Health is part of that, but results part of that, and a massive litmus test against the Bills, who will sit atop every single person's power rankings going into Week 16. If you're still holding on to the Chiefs having home field record, or you still want to put an NFC team top, you're a brave person, because that Bills team has the MVP, and they've got a lot of superpowers, and Khalil Shakir being back has just been such a fantastic key to unlock so much of that game.
Absolutely. Speaking of another powerhouse getting a W today, later on in the Sunday Night Football, my Packers getting the job done. It was a little bit shaky at one point, but we were, like you said about the Bills, just kind of held them at arm's length. The Seahawks, a couple of fumbles late really brought it a little bit closer, but I was watching the game and I was pretty happy, especially the way we started. We ran it down their throat and got a very early 2-score lead, and really just held them at arm's length, especially when Gino did go off with that ankle. I think we got the Saints next week. We win that, we lock up a spot in the playoffs. So for a team that, we lost our QB early in the season and again, just dealt with the injuries early in the season. We've got Jair coming back probably next week. I think it'd be good to get another person's opinion, but I reckon we're looking, again, another team you want to meet as probably the 6th seed.
Look, I want the Packers to do well because it makes me look smart because my preseason pick was Packers losing to, but making the Super Bowl, losing to the Houston Texans, who have locked up their own postseason futures, but not exactly in overwhelming fashion. There hasn't been much overwhelming for the Houston Texans this season other than their second half collapse streak that they had running there for a while. But look, this is what I was just talking about, right? Two really interesting teams with the Seahawks and where they position themselves. The Packers had righted things. Both no shortage of skill position talent, no shortage of running back talent, even with Kenneth Walker out. Really, really tough, gutsy, innately aggressive quarterbacks in Jordan Love and Geno Smith. There's a lot there about the Seahawks defense been playing really good football. The Packers have been a far better defense now that he who shall not be named, your former defensive coordinator, has been sent marching orders there. So there was a lot. It was a really interesting balanced game. And what did I just talk about? These games flip when you see who's dictating up front and who can turn who one-dimensional. You're absolutely right. This was the Josh Jacobs show early. They came out and just like, have some of this. Really, like feed on this for a little bit. And they won up front. They created lanes. They created yards after contact, inside the tackles, outside the tackles, set that thing up, scored early, forced a Seahawks team to be one-dimensional, which whilst Geno Smith, when he's on the paddock, is a talented passer, and Jackson Smith and Jigba's had a breakout season, DK Metcalf, the aging Tyler Lockett, but still effective in his own way. That offensive line playing having to play reactive, having to play on the back foot, only pass setting. They were just getting teed off on, and it was visceral. You could feel it. It mounted up, and the Geno goes down with what they list as a knee injury, questionable return, doesn't make it back out in the field, and we're dealt a very disappointing finish to that game. Sam Howell looked entirely out of place there. I joked that, at one point Sam Howell had -2 yards. When I said, well, look, Michael Dixon's got more passing yards than that in this game, so why don't we get Dicko a couple of snaps under center and see if he can chuck something back. If you could kick the ball to a teammate, I think it'd be a far more effective way of moving the ball through the air with Michael Dixon's tremendous control, which got highlighted by the commentary booth.
It did.
Referred to it as an Australian kick, which is different from learning about it as an Aussie rules kick or a rugby kick or rugby league kick. Never really referred to as a cricket kick. But an Australian kick, which I enjoy. But he got plenty of shine. And it was frustrating to watch how that went down the track. I'm not just saying that because Jackson Smith and Jigba is in my wide receiver 2 slot in the fantasy playoffs, and I'm hurting right now. I'm reeling on the back foot. But that was for a team that I don't need to tell you, right, that first couple months of this Packers season, turnover central, felt flaky, felt inconsistent. That early exchange was like, hey, we're ready for December football. And more importantly, we're ready for January football. We're up against a good, not an overwhelming, not a great opponent, but a really good opponent that has played good defense. And this is how we're going to set the tone early, dictate things up front, and allow us to be the two-dimensional team, allow us to be able to hit Christian Watson downfield and Romeo Dobbs with some silly hands.
Oof, great
silly hands today. Really rude behavior there. That's a very, as someone who picked the Packers to go a run on the playoffs, but as anyone invested in the Packers, someone who's a Packers fan, and I'm speaking to one right now, that's such a confidence-enriching performance.
Yeah, especially when, like you said, 9, I think it was 9 of the first 10 touches were to Jacobs. We just ran it down their throat. Having Love being, I think it was the first 11 games through a pick in every game, now 4 in a row without one, and being 17 of 18 at one point and just controlling the game. It's got back end of last year kind of vibes where we went on that run. So feeling good about it. I don't want to talk about it too much because the other two boys will give me a lot of shit. But it wasn't a danger game, especially with the way we started it early. But one of those games where if we did drop it, you're like, well, the Seahawks at home, especially in front of the 12, you're not surprised. You're not surprised that the Panthers could have put 30 on the Cowboys. You're not surprised if the Seahawks can come out and take that victory. So Very happy to get away with it and take on the Saints next week at Lambeau. Realistically, we should win that one and lock up our playoffs.
Beware of anyone that you're playing. If you go deep enough in the fantasy playoffs and you line up against Josh Jacobs next week, start praying to whoever you pray to, football gods or other, now, because that's looking like a feast.
Absolutely. And speaking of two games that are a feast, possibly it could be a feast. One of them looks like a bit of a snooze fest. We'll get onto that one second. The first one today, for those who are listening, 4-9 Bears versus the 11-2 Vikings. The Vikings are 6.5-point favourites. Surprisingly, only 65% of people are actually backing the Vikings at $1.30. I think this one, I reckon this one could be interesting. The Bears have kind of matched up against their divisional rivals, all three of us, pretty well. They took the Lions pretty deep the other week. They took the Packers, should have beaten the Packers. I think they are, I'm going to say they're better than the 6.5-point line, and just depends which Caleb Williams comes out as how far they can actually go.
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers put a hurting on them a week ago, but prior to that, it was 3 divisional matchups, and they haven't been, the blowout was 3-point losses in regulation, because the other one was the 3-point loss in overtime, and the other one was a 1-point loss to your Merry Packers. This is, when it comes to the Bears, we know this is a frustrating lost season of missed opportunity, and it's led to a whole litany of problems that extended into the head coach being removed, and we'll see whatever else happens over the off season, and if there are any further the changes made. But with the Bears, the strong finish that they had to 2023 with their defense that really brought Matt Eberflus back for this campaign, and the names, when you write them down on paper, it's promising. But this Bears team at times feels like, and particularly the defense, it feels like they're wearing the inconsistency of the other side of the ball. And that we know how much defense is a mentality, focus, effort, energy side of the ball. You have to be detailed. You have to be smart. Football IQ has to be off the charts. But there is that willingness and that want to that needs to match it. Otherwise, it's that physical contest that you'll lose. It's those little things that will slip. And at times it does feel like even the players that you feel like you could depend on that Bears defense, they've fallen off the promise that we thought we were coming into, at least the consistent performance and promise that we thought we were coming into the 2023 season. And I think that into the 24 season out of 23. And what is posed on the other side of thing with this Vikings team, this surging Vikings team that will bring a confidence and a self-belief that outmatches expectation, perhaps in a greater ratio and a greater proportion than any other team this season. Fresh off a 40-burger on the Falcons, they handled the Cards. We know they handled the Bears last time. They haven't lost. Last time the Vikings lost, it was October. And I don't like the litany of weapons that they can throw. And I'm a big believer in Caleb Williams. I have a lot of faith that there'll be strong performances. I think the windows into his talent that we've seen this season have been incredibly promising. I think Yes, reinvestment, more energy into the offensive line is needed. Yes, different coaching voices, and it's been better since they've made changes there, but it hasn't been close to the ceiling that we'd hoped for. But the idea of this exotic, aggressive Brian Flores Minnesota Vikings defense up against a reeling Bears offense that struggles for consistency, it doesn't bode well for me. I'd certainly be leaning towards the Vikings winning this one. And I really like the Vikings the rest of the way. I enjoy the symmetry of the Vikings schedule the rest of the way, because it's like a video game. Bears into Seahawks, into Packers, and then into the Lions. It's a nice little level up. It's like leveling up in Mario. Each one becomes just that little bit tougher. And that's what it feels like the rest of the way. They've got these 4 kind of, you got your familiar division opponent, and then you kind of work your way through it. And not to belittle your Packers, putting them beneath the challenge of the Lions, but no, I think this is in prime time. I predict some more exorcism of the Sam Darnold demons this whole season has been about. He's been playing some beautiful football and some resilient football. He had the dip in form, and he's come back with some of his best outings. And, he showed Kirk Cousins exactly how much the Vikings had moved on to something pretty and shiny, despite him being the backup plan coming into the season. I think this one goes towards the Vikings. But, you mentioned the contest that we've got coming up. I think it's an interesting bit of scheduling, the first week of the fantasy playoffs, and we've got a doubleheader on Monday Night Football. So no one gets to sleep on their matchups tonight. No one, unless you start Josh Allen against me. Maybe some Josh Allen drafters do get to sleep on their matchup tonight. But for most of us out there, whether you're fighting for playoff contention or you're fighting to avoid a toilet bowl run and sliding deeper into that, very few get to rest on their laurels because there are so many fantasy players at play, big names, ready to roll out tomorrow.
You're right about the Viking side of things, though. I reckon Justin Jefferson could have 1,000 and probably 10 touchdowns tomorrow. It could be really bad.
From
the other side of the coin, like you said,
ears, mate. From your words to Kevin O'Connell's ears.
6 and 7 Falcons with a 5.5 head start, which is a little bit odd. But the only thing being the 2 and 11 Raiders being on the other side. Now Max Crosby less as well. And only 57% of people actually back the Falcons at $1.40, which is surprising. Only a quick one on this one, mate, because this one will sting. Kirk Cousins is my biggest thing. We said a couple of weeks ago, I think he's every chance of being benched before the end of the season.
Me and Phil on the Breaky Show were in absolute lockstep. He should have been benched weeks ago. We've seen different versions of storied quarterbacks be replaced through injury or form or whatever unexpectedly. The most famous, right? Bledsoe and Brady, right?
Who?
You think back to one of the interesting ones we brought up was Matt Flynn, who got a bunch of free agency money. Your old mate, Flinny. Yeah. Your old mate from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And then,
record.
young, glistening rookie Russell Wilson comes in and makes that free agency purchase absolutely not worthwhile. Of course, you want to talk about Cowboys? Tony Romo, as integral to a franchise, as tied in with the brass as you could imagine, invested in a roster designer named Ezekiel Elliott, picked for him, and he gets ousted by Dak Prescott and never gets the starting reins again. To think that Kirk Cousins, yes, there's $100 million guaranteed in his contract. You can get out of certain things. You can June 1 certain things. But to think that he's earned the right with his level of play over his career and certainly this year to hold off someone like Michael Penix Jr., who I wasn't the biggest fan of, but there's clearly more energy at this point to his game. This team is in need of a spark. The division is not out of their hands yet, despite the fact that Buccaneers put on a really nice showing today. But this division, it's still there to be chased down if they can manage that. They do, if the results go their way, they do hold the tiebreaker over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, having swept them this season.
The only 2 games where Kirk has played well.
and they don't have him again. So my point being is that soft divisions and runs at playoff contention don't just come around all the time. I mean, and I'm speaking of a Packers fan who's had 3 decades straight of franchise quarterback play, probably staring down a 4th. So, you can put your earmuffs now. I know you're the host, but you can put the earmuffs on now if you get bored of hearing about this. But they don't come around, and I don't think that you made this pick for a reason. You know that talent's there. You're getting good performances out of the likes of Drake London and Bijan Robinson. There's Darnell Mooney's been a fantastic free agent addition, quietly one of the more impressive free agent wide receiver additions of the season. But it's not working with Kirk. He doesn't look like he's still a capable point and shoot quarterback when things are absolutely serene around him, but the pocket movement is sluggish. The arm strength when he's not able to set that platform. We've seen some absolute floaters out there. Those balls are hanging up there. They've got backspin on them at times. And just to get another golf analogy in there just quickly, just a little one. I know we're both aching for a Chrissy round, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this should have happened weeks ago, and maybe it's too late now, but maybe that's, if you're looking for a reason to watch this game, and it's not because you've got Falcons fantasy players, Bijan Robinson, please run wild. If it's not because of that, watch the storyline, because if the Raiders of all teams are
Max
outplaying
Crosby-less Raiders.
the Max Crosby-less Raiders, if they are outperforming particularly the quarterback position onto their 19th quarterback change of the season, I think, for the Raiders, if they're outperforming Kirko in this one, oh boy, is that call for Penix Jr. out there going to be loud and raucous.
Yeah, Mercedes-Benz Dome might will actually blow up. I could see that happening. Yeah, like I said, it's just got the makings of an absolute stinger. And the Raiders did this last year where they were, again, but they had Max Crosby this time. They were up against the wall coming into the Chiefs and made them look silly in one of their only bad losses last year. So they do have it in them. So I wouldn't be surprised. And just the way that Kirk has been playing and the fact that, like you said, the willingness to hold on to him, like even if he does play well, you can't see him taking them any further in the playoffs, like a deep run into the Super Bowl. Like, start looking at the future at some point.
Absolutely. And look, it's going to look stupid, right? If you move on from him and there was $100 million guaranteed to him, I get it. It's going to look stupid. My point is it'll look stupid for a while. And what will fix that is winning. If you inject a young quarterback who starts playing well and exciting the franchise and exciting the offense and reinvigorating them, that will make people forget very quickly. And yes, it will make your free agent acquisition look silly, but it will make your drafting look fantastic. And what's more important going forward? Is it free agent spending on $100 million plus quarterbacks, or is it your ability to draft and identify talent and take this franchise forward for the next decade?
And friend of the show, James McClintock, is part of their draft. So we want him to go well and want him to look good. Exactly right.
Absolutely. Representing strong.
We have talked for way too long, mate. Much appreciating you coming on and sliding in for the two guys that have gone on holidays. And I just wanted to... We probably didn't take the chance to actually tee off on them enough just to bring another golf analogy. But there'll be more times. There'll be more times, and we'll do it to their face. So much appreciated you coming on, mate. All the best. We will see you at the Super Bowl when the Packers make it.
Here's hoping they get there and make me look so smart in a season where I've given plenty of takes to make me look completely the opposite.
Haven't we all? Thank you very much, mate. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, mate.